You to panel 3, Energy from Renewable Resources, which is a obviously very timely topic, and one in which Massachusetts, its congressional delegation and research and entrepreneurship has had a substantial impact. So we have some great representatives of all three of those sectors here. I will introduce the panelists. We'll ask each to speak for about 10 minutes, and actually very strictly enforced 10 minutes, in fact. And then we will move to questions and discussion. So I'll introduce all four of the panelists. Now, if you're counting, you'll see that there are only 3 here. One of them is finishing up his lecture on macroeconomics to students, in which he is, among other things, highlighted energy from renewable resources. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to present Representative Edward Markey. He is the ranking member of the House Natural Resources Committee, on which he has served since his election to Congress in 1976. He's an exceptional choice for today's panel as the author of the first increase in fuel economy standards in 3 decades, key contribution to moving this country away from its dependence on fossil fuels. He is an alum of Boston College and also holds a JD from the Boston College Law School. And he has been an extraordinary advocate of clean energy in the United States and served as a consumer champion against fossil fuel dependence. From 2007 to 2010, while his party held Congress, Representative Markey served as the chair of the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming. Throughout his years in Congress, he worked very closely with Representative Olver to protect our Commonwealth's natural resources and to push for tougher energy standards and regulation. So we're very lucky to have Representative Markey join us. Our second speaker will be Catherine Ratte. She is a native of the region, having been raised in Amherst. One of her earliest political memories was helping with fundraising events for Representative Olver at age 10. So one of my first political memories was leafleting my neighborhood for George McGovern in 1972. So we obviously come from similar, cut from similar cloth. She is an alum of Brown University and holds a master's degree, 2 master's degrees, from University of Wisconsin, and they're perfect for this panel. One is in urban and regional planning, and the other is in social work. So that's a really ideal combination, and a panel that I hope will talk about both jobs and environment. She is currently the principal planner and manager in the environmental and land use section of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, the organization she's worked with since returning to the area in the late 90s. She works on sustainability issues in the two-county area. She implemented the region's first food security plan and leads efforts to engage citizens in planning for regional sustainability. And working on that process. She's also one of the developers of the Commonwealth's first regional clean energy and climate action plan, and has helped local cities and towns help meet their obligations on sustainability and green energy. Our third speaker, Lynn Benander, is president and CEO of Co-op Power, which is a consumer-owned renewable energy co-op based right here in western Massachusetts. She's also the president of Northeast Biodiesel. Co-op Power has supported the development of 5 solar installation businesses and also helped develop Energia, a socially responsible energy services company based in Holyoke. And that's a company that oversees efficient energy upgrades for a variety of properties. She's supported the development of affordable, sustainable energy products and services for the many members of Co-op Power. She's also worked closely with Representative Olver on funding to achieve local economic growth through the clean energy industry. So we're very lucky to have her expertise on this panel. I will introduce in absentia my colleague and dear friend, Robert Pollin, whom I expect will arrive shortly. He is professor of economics at UMass Amherst and co-directs the Political Economy Research Institute, which is probably the world's leading progressive think tank. Bob is a macroeconomist. His research focuses on low-wage workers in the U.S. and globally, also on financial markets, and in particular for today's panel, on building the clean energy economy. He most recently authored Back to Full Employment, which argues that full employment economy is possible, and that, in fact, it can be integrally joined with protecting the environment and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. So he's a leading expert on jobs and environment, not jobs or environment. He has been a consultant to the U.S. Department of Energy and other agencies and public organizations on the clean energy transition. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the floor to Representative Markey, who will speak first. He'll be followed by Catherine Ratte, followed by Lynn, followed by Bob.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, so much, and thank you so much for honoring John Olver. The man was clearly overeducated to be a member of Congress for all of these years. He understood science, mathematics. He understood the future. He was constantly talking about the future, about climate change. He had maps on his wall in his office dealing with the rise in CO2 on the planet. When you sat there in his office talking to him, that's what was next to him. That's the level of importance which he paid to this issue of energy and environment and science in general. So John's leaving Congress is a great loss to us because he scientifically and politically knew more about these issues than anybody. He could link the science and the politics. He understood where it was going, and he was, for us, you know, a source of courage and direction for where we had to go. And for me, I knew that if he spoke on any of these issues, that he was right and everyone else was wrong. Okay? And I believe that from the day that he came to Congress in 1991. He spoke almost as a seer. So where are we? Well, this is a post-Hurricane Sandy era. You know, what had happened at the Republican convention was that Mitt Romney decided to make a joke about climate change, about the seas rising. And then, about 6 weeks later, Mother Nature got angry, very angry. And so for the final 6 days of the campaign, it was pretty much Mother Nature versus the Koch brothers. That's what the race was turning into, huh? And at the end of the day, Mother Nature, as she usually does, she won. Because you could see the shift in attitude. You could see the shift in the attitude of Governor Christie. You could see when Mayor Bloomberg endorsed President Obama, he says it's because of climate change. You heard Colin Powell talking about the issue. It was almost a little bit like Noah's Ark, where it was one of each, you know, hand in hand, going onto this ark to make sure that the word would spread, that something must be done. And so I think we're in a new era now, which is going to give us a great new opportunity to move forward. But let me note first where we've been. Since 2005, the United States has gone from 6 billion metric tons of CO2 being emitted per year up into the atmosphere to only 5.2 billion metric tons, which will be emitted in the United States this year, by the end of this year. So that's quite a reduction, 6 billion down to 5.2 billion in metric tons in a relatively brief period of time. Now, there's a number of reasons for that, and I think it's important for us to talk about it because it shows that real progress can be made when you begin to put the component parts of the individual energy policies in place in order to make it possible to be successful. So, as Michael said, you know, year after year, I used to make the amendment on the House floor to increase fuel economy standards. And in 2001, I lost. In 2003, I lost. In 2005, I lost. But Nancy Pelosi created a select committee on energy independence and global warming in 2007, and she asked me to be the chairman of it. Now, I had been on the Energy Committee at that point for 30 years, and I had been on the Natural Resources Committee for 30 years. So at that point, it was 60 years of hearings on energy that I had gone to. No other human being had ever done this in the history of Congress. And now she asked me to chair yet a third committee, the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming. And the first goal which we had was to increase the fuel economy standards. They had not been increased since 1975. And John knows everything about these issues. And in December of 2007, I stood with Nancy Pelosi over the shoulder of George Bush as he signed that law that broke the logjam that gave the authority to the president, which, by the way, President Obama used in order to increase fuel economy standards to 54.5 miles per gallon by the year 2026. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means, believe it or not, if it goes to that, that's 6 billion metric tons of CO2 that will never go up into the atmosphere. In other words, it's equal to one whole year of the United States. Actually, more than a year now, because it's down to 5.2 billion metric tons. So that was a huge moment. But it took political action in order to accomplish it, and then a president willing to take the authority, combined with Massachusetts versus EPA, the Supreme Court decision, in order to effectuate that end. And I'm very proud of that. Because, one, you reduce greenhouse gases, but two, you're also telling OPEC we don't need your oil any more than we need your sand. So it's a huge national security issue as well. It's about 3 million barrels of oil per day. It's more than all the oil that we import from the Persian Gulf. And what's the basis of it? Technology, science. Now, in the utility sector, this year there will be 12,000 new megawatts of wind installed in the United States. Isn't that amazing? 12 million new megawatts. So if you think a Seabrook nuclear power plant does 1,000 megawatts, and there is greater efficiency in a nuclear power plant, but 12,000 megawatts of wind in 1 year in the United States, that's huge. 3,000 new megawatts of solar, which is going to be installed in the United States in 2012. So just between wind and solar, 15,000 new megawatts. Now, what is that all about? Well, it's all about the stimulus bill in 2009. It's all about state renewable electricity standards. It's all about the tax policy, which gives 2 cents a kilowatt-hour tax break for the installation of wind across our country, which, by the way, is expiring at the end of 2012. In another 5 weeks. And the Republicans are saying they're going to allow it to expire. So one of the big issues that will be in contention between the Democrats and the Republicans over the next 5 weeks will be the Republicans insisting on oil tax breaks continuing, $4 billion a year. You heard Romney say he would never cut them. And the Democrats saying, this wind thing is working. You can't cut out that $4 billion a year. So we're going to come down to a real fight over this before the end of the year, because if it continues at the pace at which it is going, we will be able to add, most likely, about 75,000 new megawatts of wind and solar over the next 5 years in our country. We're already up to approximately 50,000 megawatts of wind. This thing has been absolutely on fire over the last 5 years. And with solar, it's just taking off. 3,000 new megawatts this year. The experts estimate 5,000 next year. The economies of scale are kicking in. Now, everybody here knows that Solyndra, this controversial solar firm, did not collapse because the price of solar was so high. It collapsed because the price of solar was so low. Solar dropped 50% in the price of generating a single kilowatt of electricity in 1 year. 50% drop. So the price is now plummeting in wind and in solar. And these changes are making all of the difference in the world in terms of its competitiveness with coal. Coal, the single largest contributor to greenhouse gases and to global warming emitted from the United States. So here's another little item for you. 5 years ago, 51% of all of the CO2 that went up into the atmosphere was generated by coal. 51% of all electricity generated in the United States was coal. 5 years later, we have it down to 36%. That's how rapidly this change is taking place. And there's a real reason to believe that the Obama administration is going to promulgate new regulations that deal with putting CO2 controls on new power plants and old power plants in our country. And if that happens, we're going to see a dramatically lower level of CO2 coming out of utilities in our country as well. And to move to the corollary subject, which is natural gas. Now, natural gas has issues with fracking. The chemicals that are shot into the ground, into the water table, has to be protected against. The methane that can be released, we have to ensure that they absolutely contain that. The wastewater, we have to make sure that's properly protected. But natural gas emits half of the CO2 as coal. So over the last 5 years, there has been 5 times as much new natural gas electrical generation in our country as coal. And you combine that with the wind and the solar and the new energy efficiency that's been built in, then you have a real revolution on your hands. In fact, natural gas is so cheap that over the last few years, 1.5 million homes in the Northeast have converted from home heating oil over to natural gas. Got that number again? 1.5 million homes have converted in the Northeast from home heating oil over to natural gas. So that dramatically lowers the amount of CO2 going up because it has fewer pollutants. And what we have to do is to make sure that we build in the safeguards, that we get the benefits of it. But in doing so, you can see a pathway to the future. Now, the smart grid. The smart grid is basically the product of 3 bills which I was able to pass back in the 1990s. My broadband bill of 1990, not one home in America had broadband in January of 1996 when the President signed that bill. Can I say that again? Not one home had broadband in January of 1996. So my satellite dish bill of 1992, moving over 200 megahertz so that these devices that people carry around could move to broadband, moved from black rotary dial phones to BlackBerries, passed in 93, and then the whole broadband revolution. Well, the broadband revolution makes the smart grid revolution possible because to take the wind and the solar off of the deserts, off of the oceans, off of the prairies, and to integrate it in a way which is highly efficient with the rest of the electrical grid system is not possible if you do not have a broadband revolution to manage that electricity. So my 3 bills in the 1990s creates the bottom line technological capacity for the management of the electricity that makes it easier for utilities to move over to renewables despite their intermittency. So that's something as well which President Obama is continuing to move forward. Now, in 2009, Henry Waxman and I, working with Nancy Pelosi, John Olver, we were able to pass a bill called the Waxman-Markey Bill, which had as its goal the reduction of all greenhouse gases by 80% by the year 2050, 17% by the year 2020. 80% of all greenhouse gases in the United States would be reduced by the year 2050. It passed 219 to 212 on the House floor January 26, 2009, but Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate filibustered it to death. Now, the good news is that the individual component parts of the fuel economy standards, the wind, the solar, the efficiency, the smart grid, all these other things that are coming to pass, they actually have us on a pathway which it might be possible to reach that 17% reduction in greenhouse gases coming from the United States by the year 2020. We're already gone down from 6 billion metric tons down to 5.2 billion metric tons this year, over a 7-year period. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a fight. It's going to take the energy of everyone to be a part of this monumental struggle to deal with the greatest threat that our planet has ever known. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. We have to engage in preventative activity at the local level, the local planning level, the Pioneer Valley level, at the state level, at the federal level. And ultimately, we have to have credibility in order to talk to the Chinese and the Indians. You cannot preach temperance from a bar stool. You yourself cannot be smoking a cigar while you're telling the kids smoking's bad for you. You can't have a beer in your hand saying don't take up drinking. And you can't tell the Chinese and the Indians, do not emit CO2. It's bad for the planet if you don't have a comprehensive plan in place. It just doesn't work. And so while we're making progress, we have to ensure that we continue to make the advancement that is so comprehensive that, in fact, we have the credibility, the moral, the political credibility to be able to say to the Chinese and Indians, let us work together to save the planet from the worst consequences of climate change. You've seen it in your region. We have now seen it in the Gulf of Mexico, but now we've seen it hitting the city of New York and New Jersey. If that storm had hit Boston, Faneuil Hall would have been under 15 feet of water. Back Bay would have returned to its original personality as a bay. It would have been buried in water. That's the reality. So we've received the warning. We have a chance to do something. And there's no better place for it to come from than the Minutemen of Massachusetts, okay, who have risen up throughout history in order to be at the cutting edge of all of these revolutions. That's where it comes from us here in Massachusetts. And whether it be the Freedom Riders that went south for voting rights, the suffragettes that rose up to say that women have a right to vote, the movement against the war in Vietnam that ultimately brought it to its end, the call for health care for all, which passed finally on the House floor in 2009, and now climate change. It must come from us. Thank you all so much for everything that you do on this issue.
Thank you very much. So as you heard in my bio, I grew up in Amherst on Snell Street, and I remember, as Michael mentioned, helping out with fundraisers for the congressman when I was about 10 years old. My parents, John and Lou Ratte, are friends of the congressman and his wife, Rose, and my babysitters, the Dempseys, Skip, and Dottie's kids, let me tag along at the fundraisers. Those experiences were a great introduction to what it means to be part of a community that cares about its future, and it was also a wonderful way to learn about government. In these times when many malign government, it is clear those people do not live in Massachusetts, especially our Pioneer Valley, where the vast majority of us are actively engaged in self-governance, serving on boards and committees, participating in town meeting, and creating and implementing the plans and regulations that guide our lives. Here in Congressman Olver's district, we have met the government, and it is us, thanks to our role models, most especially Congressman John Olver. It's such an honor and a privilege to be one of the people who gets to thank you publicly and highlight some of the remarkable work you have helped us all accomplish here in the region you serve for the past 44 years. The Congressman talked about the goals for the country, and I'm going to bring us back down to our region and talk about some of the accomplishments that you've helped us achieve here in our region. For 15 years, I've been fortunate to work as a regional planner at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Thanks to the Congressman and his exceedingly competent staff, especially Natalie Blay and Kristen, our region sits at the head of the pack with respect to clean, safe, sustainable energy in Massachusetts. In 2003, when the Congressman relaunched his Northern Tier Economic Development Initiative, which was economic development via clean energy, the arts, and healthcare, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was in the process of inventorying clean energy activity in Hampshire and Hampden counties. It was obvious that our region, the Congressman's region, was already well ahead of most of the country with respect to clean energy activity, thanks to those of you who got us going in the 70s. Thanks to the Congressman and his colleagues in state government, Massachusetts was one of the first states in the nation in 1998 to adopt the Renewable Portfolio Standard, establishing ambitious goals for the Commonwealth with respect to clean energy generation and putting the tools in place to achieve those goals. As articulated back at the turn of the century, at the turn of the state's goal was to generate 750 megawatts of clean energy by 2009. As the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and our partners documented all the clean energy activity in our region, we saw the need for a clean energy planning process to move us forward ever faster and more efficiently. And thanks in part to the Congressman's support, we were successful in securing an unsolicited grant from the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, which is now the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, to facilitate this planning process. We reached out to our colleagues at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments and the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. BRPC decided not to partner with us, but FERCOG and PVPC moved ahead and eventually completed the Commonwealth's first regional clean energy plan, thanks to the leadership of and collaboration with groups like Co-op Power and the Center for Eco-Technology. Is John still here? Our Pioneer Valley Clean Energy Plan enumerates 4 goals. Reduce the region's energy use, cite clean, safe, sustainable energy sources here in the region, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we did go for the 80% by 2050, and create jobs. Because our region is home to approximately 10% of the Commonwealth's population, we assumed responsibility for about 10% of the Commonwealth's clean energy goal, or 75 megawatts of clean energy cited here in our region. While we have not always been successful in our collaborations with the Congressman to secure federal support for our initiatives, he and his staff have always been accessible and available to help us and guide us with our work. We've prepared numerous white papers which have been advanced by the Congressman's staff, and I'm pleased to tell you that today we are home to 69.15 megawatts of clean energy generating capacity here in Western Massachusetts. So we haven't quite achieved our goal, but we continue to work. Clean, safe, sustainable energy in our region comes from the variety of sources mentioned previously. But here we also capture gas from landfills and convert it to energy. We process waste into energy. And of course, we harness the power of water, the wind, and the sun, as well as biomass. Solar photovoltaic energy accounts for our region's largest percentage of clean energy, 28.7%. And many of the solar photovoltaic installations are small on people's homes and businesses, which is simply another example of the Congressman's legacy. Each individual effort counts. Just as Congressman Olver has always understood, clean energy and energy efficiency are not only good for the environment and for saving money, but it's also good for jobs here in our region. We have more clean energy jobs per capita than the rest of the Commonwealth, 24.26 jobs per capita versus 20.69 in the rest of the state. In 2011 to 2012, our growth rate for clean energy jobs was 6.2%. Because our region was so well organized to take action on reducing energy use and citing new clean energy here, we lead the Commonwealth in green community certifications, a voluntary state program in which municipalities pledge to reduce their municipal energy use by 20% in 5 years, and also amend their local zoning to facilitate the siting of clean energy or clean energy-related development. In return, municipalities receive grants, a minimum of up to $125,000, and in some cases as much as almost $1 million for the city of Springfield. Thanks to the groundwork laid by our regional clean energy planning process, Western Massachusetts municipalities have received over $6 million to reduce energy use in the past few years. Even though Western Massachusetts is out front on clean energy generation and reducing energy use and acting to address the climate crisis and creating green jobs, we are not resting on our laurels. Right now, as you've heard from previous speakers, all 3 regions in Western Massachusetts are benefiting from federal funds to promote sustainability, thanks again to the relationships of Congressman Olver. This is a very competitive national funding initiative through which only a few regions across the country have been funded. The Berkshire Regional Planning Commission, the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission have all received support from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to facilitate sustainability planning and doing. This funding lasts through into 2014. At the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we are updating our 2008 Clean Energy Plan into a Climate Action Clean Energy Plan, among many other projects. We are optimistic about Olver's legacy, and we hope that it will, we expect that it will live on in his staff, who we hope will stay here in the region and help us to continue to achieve the support from the federal government that we depend on so greatly. And thank you, Congressman Olver, for inspiring us with your example.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Benander with Co-op Power. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. I'm especially grateful to be here because I did work on my 2 degrees here at UMass. I'm an alum, and I studied in the education department. And as a manager of a cooperative, you might imagine I get to sit with lots of groups of people trying to figure things out. So my education degree has really served me extremely well in being able to facilitate those kinds of discussions, and my training in graduate mathematics has helped me to really understand what logical systems look like. So between education and mathematics, it's really served me very well. I'm very grateful. And I'm also very grateful to work in a district that Congressman Olver's leadership has played a very essential and key role in. I work with groups around the country from time to time. Co-op Power serves New England and New York, so I get to step out of the Pioneer Valley quite a lot. And we have a very unique set of relationships here that are very cooperative in nature. Congressman Olver and his staff have brought groups that work on energy and environment issues together many, many times, and Co-op Power and all of us have benefited from those relationships. And the conversation is about understanding what's going on and figuring out how to take action. So working with FERCOG and the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, our planning agencies not only plan, but they do support the doing of things. And I think Congressman Olver's leadership has helped play a big role in that. Co-op Power is a multi-class, multi-race cooperative. We work on energy issues. We work on building community ownership of the things we depend on most, because we believe that communities having an ownership stake in those industries that provide the products and services that we need to sustain life here is a very important part of the economic equation. It gives us access to jobs and control over jobs, access to the products and services we need at a price we can afford, in a way that we can afford them, and in a way that we need them. And we believe that those are important parts of a cooperative economy, as well as in the midst of this very profit-driven economy, helps communities have a human element to their lives. So we're grateful for Congressman Olver's commitment to the environment, to energy, to transportation policy, to economic, social, and environmental justice, to sustainability, to local economic development, and support for community-based efforts like ours. But I want to talk about one more thing that I haven't heard mentioned, and that is to ethical and moral decision-making. There have been some votes that Congressman Olver has made that I didn't always agree with, but never once did I question his motivation. I was flipping through the channel on my television set and came across the Aspen Idea Festival, and David Brooks was talking about our moral character as a country. And he said that there was a study that asked college students what the last moral dilemma was that they had faced. And they couldn't answer. They said, well, I had to decide whether or not to go out Friday night or stay home and study. And I think that part of my training here at UMass did include a moral education, how to make ethically based decisions. I took this comment from David Brooks into my class at Greenfield Community College last weekend, and I asked them, the class is on community energy solutions, and we were talking about the fact that the United States consumes way more than our share of the energy produced on the planet, and that we produce way more carbon dioxide than anybody else, and it's the poor of the world that are paying for that. The Red Cross says they're 4 times likely to die than people who have wealth, who can get themselves out of harm's way more easily and protect themselves. And I was talking to them about the moral issues related to this, and I said, so how do you understand ethics and morality? And one of the women said, well, I'm teaching my kids to clean their place when we go to visit another family, to pick up their dishes and bring them to the kitchen. And I was just stunned. I don't think we're talking about that enough. I don't think we're really helping people understand that this climate change is the biggest issue facing our culture. And it's not enough to have logical reasoning and science-based reasoning, but we also need compassion and we need ethics in order to really make the decisions going forward. Here's a picture of the leadership of Northeast Biodiesel in 2004, where Congressman Olver and his staff helped us secure funding from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to do research on what were the energy businesses that communities could build that would help us play a significant role in our local economies. And from that research, we've been able to build 10 businesses and 150 jobs. And we're very proud of that. We feel like it's made a big difference. And I just want to say that we feel like we're swimming uphill sometimes because there's a lot of public policy leaders who believe that small efforts are insignificant. I was at Boston University about 5 years ago at a conference that had a lot of oil company and car company executives. There were about 800 people in the auditorium, and Mr. Bedzak was presenting his research on how the United States, he had done research for Congress describing how the United States should meet its energy needs in the future. And all of them were, all of the strategies he was proposing were more drilling and more in very severe environmental degradation in order to secure small amounts of fuels that would only last, again, at the most wildest predictions, another 100 years. And when I asked why energy efficiency and local renewable energy efforts weren't included in his pie chart about how we were going to meet that, he said that those measures were too small to measure, and he didn't have any data that allowed him to include that. And I think the Solarize Boston's efforts in the last 6 months, where they signed on 5 megawatts of small solar, proves that that's not true, that no developer could develop a 5 megawatt project in 6 months. But Solarize Boston just was able to do that just recently. So small efforts, when they add up, can really make a difference. Okay, next slide here. Co-op power is, we have local councils that make up co-op power, and what they do is they meet and decide what products and services they want, what businesses they want to put their money in, and what work they want to do. And the trick is, it's all the same business. So we do green job training, Our members invest their money to build those businesses, and we sell them back to our membership in those communities. And here's pictures of our members gathering together on the top to install a solar hot water system in a day. In the bottom, our leadership training, and one of our trucks on the right there, we're in about 30 homes a week doing energy efficiency work in the Mass Save program across the state. Next slide. We help build Energia in partnership with Nuestras Raíces and Nueva Esperanza in Holyoke, provides local jobs for young kids, and not young kids, but young adults. One of the students I'll just tell you about for a minute, his name is Jamil. He's at the top of the stairs there in the middle. He flunked out of 9th grade 3 times in Holyoke. The 3rd time, he joined our Green Job Training Program. He started working for us when he was 17, 3 years ago, and he became he was working on energy efficiency crew. He was so smart, he became a crew leader within a year, and he's, the next year he came to me and he said, I'm ready for level 4. I said, what's level 4? He said, well, the first level was I was supposed to commit to the training program. The second level, I was supposed to commit to a career. The third level, I was supposed to, commit to a job. The third level, a career. And the fourth level was to my community. He said, I'm ready to give back. And he's been doing that ever since. He ran for the board of directors of Co-op Power. He's been one of my bosses now for a couple of years. And he's a very dynamic young leader in the Holyoke community, helping a lot of other people walk out of poverty too. Next slide. Northeast Biodiesel is a biodiesel plant that Energia took us 6 months to launch. Northeast Biodiesel, I think, is going to take us about 12 years to launch. In the tortoise and hare story, we're hoping to be, we will be the tortoise that crosses the line. We had a chance to launch this business in 2005 with $2 million in venture capital, and we turned it down. That venture capital firm went on to buy another plant in Delaware, and the plant was sold for parts in 2008 after they had gotten their money out. We turned it down because they told us that the exit strategy would be that we would get a little bit of return on the $125,000 in cash we were putting in. And our members said, that's enough, not enough. We want biodiesel for generations, and if we have to raise every dollar of it ourselves in order to safeguard this plant for a long time to serve our community, we'll do that, and we will. We're getting very close. Next slide. Biodiesel is a fuel that you can use in any oil heat system and in any diesel engine. If you use it in an oil heat system at 20% biodiesel and 80% low sulfur diesel fuel, it will burn cleaner than natural gas. And it's a way of reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. Next slide. Next slide. And here's a picture of the plant that's going in Greenfield, not too far from here. Next slide. And we've bought our $600,000 processor. It's a processor that McDonald's, we just heard, did research to find out how to process their recycled oil, and they did an international search for which technology to select and ended up selecting the same processor. And the guy from Cargill who's consulting with McDonald's said, so Lynn, how did you all pick this processor? I said, well, we did our research, we did our due diligence, we went around the world and figured out which one was the best, and this is the one we picked. He said, well, that's great, we came to the same conclusion. So we're sharing technology resources with them. And we're excited about the economic development that it's going to bring to the region. Next, last slide. And we think that it's, this biodiesel plant is going to be great for the environment, it's going to be good for our local economies, and it's going to support our efforts to become more energy independent. Thank you all very much.
Well, I'm going to have to be brief because I'm standing on one leg here, having broken my hip 2 months ago in a stupid biking accident. But you know, there's this expression from Rabbi Hillel that they asked him, you know, summarize everything that you know that's in the Bible, everything that you've studied all your generations, and summarize it while standing on one foot. So that's where he comes up with love thy neighbor as thyself, all the rest is commentary. So I'm just going to get right to the heart of things, and all the rest will just have to be commentary. Very, very honored to be asked to speak on this occasion. I'm a great admirer of Congressman Olver. I have benefited from everything he's done in Washington as a member of our community we've heard about. I've also benefited in a more personal way, and I will get to that in a minute. Congressman Olver, as we've already heard, has been a leader in Congress in fighting for climate change action, in fighting for the project of creating a green economy, which is going to be a long, hard fight, but as our previous speakers have said, it's one we really don't have any choice in fighting because of the imperative of the ecological constraints forced on us by climate change. So Congressman Olver's made many, many contributions. One was, of course, the passage, the authoring and the passage of the Green Building and Technical Assistance Act in the 110th Congress. Now, this was a very important measure for establishing green building standards and making sure they got enforced. Now, why is this important? Why is this measure important, the one that Congressman Olver authored here? Well, it's because buildings consume 40% of all the energy in our economy. So buildings are the biggest single source of energy usage, and by correspondence, they're the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. Indeed, buildings create greenhouse gas emissions disproportionate to other sources precisely because buildings use more electricity. And electricity, two-thirds roughly of the electricity that is, or the energy that is generated to produce electricity, two-thirds gets wasted. So until we focus on that problem and increase the efficiency of electricity generation from energy sources, buildings will continue to be the biggest single source of greenhouse gas emissions by a long shot. So the measure that Congressman Olver authored and got passed in the 110th Congress was extremely important for establishing building standards and making sure they get enforced. The point about investing in building efficiency is that it's actually, in an engineering sense, it's very easy to see how to achieve efficiencies up into the range of about 30%, and to achieve these efficiencies through investments that have, according to various studies, the range of differences between 3 and 5 year paybacks. So you get a very rapid payback on investments in energy efficiency to the point where you can get big returns, 30% reduction in efficiency, which of course comes back to the building owner in a reduced energy bill, and you get your capital expenditure back in 3 to 5 years. Now, one of the questions that economists ask when you hear these data are well established in the engineering literature. In fact, a very, very useful study by the National Academy of Sciences in 2010 summarizes all this. So from the economist standpoint, the question is, well, okay, if there's such big savings and they're so easy to get, and we have the incentive from Congressman Olver, then why isn't everybody doing it? Okay? It's the conundrum in economics is, well, if the sidewalks are littered with $50 bills, then why isn't everybody picking them up? So why isn't everybody picking up this incentive? In my view, the issue, a lot of it has to do with inertia. It is that this is something new. something that people aren't accustomed to. Even if you get your money back in 3 to 5 years, that's still 3 to 5 years. Meanwhile, somebody has to make the initial investment. And also, these numbers are averages. That doesn't mean that every building is going to get it. You might be the one that isn't going to get it, and now you've just put up your money, and now you're not getting your 30% saving. So one of the big issues, in my view, in advancing this cause that Congressman Olver has pioneered is creating much stronger set of risk-sharing. I'm not saying spending more money, I'm saying more innovative financing methods so that the financing and risk-sharing are such that, these averages will apply to people, and in the case of the initial capital expenditures, the shifting the risk and shifting the initial expenditure off of the building owner. We heard briefly about the case of NYSERDA, a New York State authority. In New York, they passed an innovative measure called on-bill financing, in which the way that you finance investments in building efficiency is you pay for it by reducing your savings on your energy bill, so that the energy bill, if you get a 30% savings, you, the building owner, maybe gets 15% of the savings, your lender gets the other 15%, and that's the way to move this forward. So thinking about this in terms of future developments, we have to build on the achievements that Congressman Olver and others have put before us and put before us as challenges. Now, on a more personal note, another achievement, I don't think that Congressman Olver probably puts this at the same level in terms of his achievements for the 110th Congress, was that he managed to secure what used to be called in impolite circles a earmark for our institute here, the Political Economy Research Institute. And the earmark, the funds were used, we were not squandered, by the way. The funds were used to support our research on the employment effects of investing in a clean energy economy. And so this was work that we did in 2007 and 2008, ending at least the first phase of it in a study that was called Green Recovery. And I've written, I've been a professor for 30 years, and I've written a lot of papers, and most of which, nobody pays much attention to, and I've gotten used to it. I don't take it personally. This one, Green Recovery, ended up having a huge impact, such that because of the timing, it came out in September 2008, it ended up being, according to the New York Times, it ended up being the blueprint for the green components of the 2009 stimulus program. So this was work that we had done here at Perry at the Political Economy Research Institute that laid out the benefits in terms of job creation of investing in building efficiency, smart grid, public transportation, and renewable energy. And our basic finding was as follows, that investing in the green economy generates about 3 times more jobs per dollar of expenditure as opposed to maintaining spending in the fossil fuel economy. To be more precise, in the green economy, we estimated using government statistics that you get about 17 jobs per dollar of expenditure as opposed to about 5 in the maintaining the fossil fuel economy. And so 3 times more. So the idea that had been hovering for basically a generation that you could support the environment, we needed to support the environment, but to do so was going to be a massive trade-off, right? We could support the environment, yes, we need to, but let's face it, it's going to cost jobs. And our research argued exactly the opposite, that investing in the green economy was indeed a major engine of job creation, and we were lucky enough to see our work get incorporated into the stimulus program. And this was work that was originally supported by John Olver. And this was work, by the way, that other people that we'd asked for support were not willing to support. So it was really Congressman Olver's support that enabled this work to get off the ground. Now, having done the work, we now have to ask the question, well, what happened? Because this actually did pass. It became law. It was the biggest green energy investment project in the history of the United States. We know how much it was for because Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan kept talking about it the whole campaign. This was the $90 billion program that was completely wasted, we were told. Not just wasted, that it was just given money was going out to their friends, including their buddies at Solyndra. And so how can I stand here in good conscience and talk about this program that was an obvious failure? Okay, so I want to end thinking about the future, and again, building on the work that Congressman Olver enabled us to do, to tell you right now that the project is not a failure. It was a success. How could it not be? If you spend money on something, you will create jobs. The work that we were doing, estimating the level of job creation per dollar of expenditure, came right out of the government statistics. And so it turns out that when the money was spent on the green economy project parts of the stimulus, jobs were created basically as our estimating model had suggested. Now, that doesn't mean that it ended the recession. It did not. For one thing, it wasn't big enough. For more importantly, this was a feature of this measure that was not well understood. That going from essentially no investments in green economy, maybe $1 billion, to $90 billion entailed very large startup costs, very steep initial learning curve. I know also because after that bill was passed, I was hired by the Energy Department to consult on implementation of the bill. And when you start at nothing and then you say, oh, let's spend $90 billion and don't waste a penny of it, it's not easy to do. And so, in fact, the Congressional Budget Office itself, in their estimation of the impact of the stimulus program, had laid out very clearly that this component of the stimulus, the green energy component, was going to really start happening in years 3 to 5. It was going to be too difficult to get major amounts out in years 1 and 2, and that is exactly what happened. The only problem is the money was taken away after maybe 10–15% of it was actually spent. Now, but when it was spent, the jobs were created as projected, and we heard about people getting jobs, and these are good jobs. Now, what about Solyndra, okay? The big failure, the poster child of the failure of the green program. Well, the other thing I want to say, speaking about the future and thinking about the green energy, is actually the program from which Solyndra received its loan guarantee, which was a loan guarantee component of the stimulus program, was and is a success. It is a success. It is not a failure. Now, let me just tell you why. There was $16 billion in loan guarantees that were approved by this program. Now, a lot of them were not approved for good reason. And I know because I was asked to evaluate some of the applications for loan guarantees. And they were really bad. I mean, I have to tell you, and I don't even know what company it is for sure. I have my suspicions. They asked me to evaluate, they had to do an employment impact assessment to get their loan guarantee. And I looked at this, and I actually said, if an undergraduate at UMass had given me work of this quality, they'd be lucky to get a B-. And it was because, not that the people were stupid, maybe they were, but I don't think so. The reason is we had no infrastructure. Under Bush, under all those years under Bush, we didn't have anything like this. And so maybe these companies were used to just doing nothing and getting the money thrown at them. And there wasn't that much money in the first place for green energy. So the ones that I looked at were mostly ones that I said they should not approve. In any case, there was approvals. So there was $16 billion that was in loan guarantees, by the way. So the government doesn't pay a penny unless the company defaults. It's a contingent liability. So there are 23 loans guaranteed for clean energy under this program, totaling $16 billion in private loans that were guaranteed. Now, of those 23 loans for $16 billion, there are 3 defaults or near default, including Solyndra, totaling $648 million. That constitutes 4.1% of the total amount that has been guaranteed. Private lenders, federal guarantee. That means 96% of the loans that have been made for clean energy projects under this program, at least to date, are successful. Moreover, I should say that the $648 million that the government has had to cover, of that, roughly half is taken care of by the government taking over the assets of the failed companies and then selling them, like you were talking about, selling the assets. So basically we're talking about the government to date putting up $300 million, thereabouts, to cover $16 billion in new projects to help build the green economy. By this calculation, by any calculation, it seems to me that at least to date, this project is a massive success and should be understood as such. I would just also say in terms of jobs, when we were working on this stuff in the Energy Department and I was estimating jobs per dollar of government expenditure, obviously the loan guarantee program was by far the best because you're leveraging private money. The government doesn't spend anything unless there's a default. Of course, we know there'll be some defaults. So effectively, if we say that there's $16 billion that was spent or is being spent, according to our estimating model, that would generate about 200,000 jobs, okay? Now, that's the $16 billion spent, but the government only spent $300 million. Now, if you do the simple arithmetic, that means that for every $1 million that was spent on these projects, you got 700 jobs. 700 jobs per government dollar of expenditure, as opposed to 13 jobs per dollar of expenditure if it's unleveraged government spending in the renewable sector, and 5 jobs in the fossil fuel sector. So all in all, this is a massively successful project. It's unfortunate that it has become this political football that people keep pounding on the failure of Solyndra. The overall picture is the green economy, the clean energy project that has been advanced by Congressman Olver and of course by Congressman Markey also and others, is the single most important industrial development project in this country, and we have to be grateful to Congressman Olver for all he's done to advance it. Thank you very much.